The Tribunal Chamber hummed with anticipation as I, Calvaris of the Galactic Combat Authority, settled my third and fourth arms across the observation panel. 20 cycles I had spent evaluating species across 42 sectors, and never, not once, had I encountered a claim so absurd. They want to register what, exactly? My colleague Threxin clicked his mandibles in disbelief, his eye stalks swiveling toward the data screen. A cutting technique, I replied, barely suppressing the derisive trill in my voice. For something they call air. Threxin's entire body shuddered with what I recognized as his species' version of laughter. Air? The substance that surrounds us? The nothing between solid matter? That air? Precisely that air. The humans had submitted their application 17 solar days ago, and it had been bouncing around the bureaucratic channels ever since, with each department assuming it was some sort of clerical error. But no, they were serious. Deadly serious, apparently. The doors to the chamber split open with a pneumatic hiss, and in walked two of them. Humans. I had seen perhaps a dozen in my career, mostly traders or diplomats, but these two were different. The male wore what appeared to be some sort of ceremonial fabric wrapped and tied around his torso, black as the void between stars. The female, shorter but moving with the same peculiar grace, wore similar attire in deep red. Calvaris, I presume. The male spoke first, his translator rendering his words in perfectly neutral Galactic standard. I am Master Takeshi Yamamoto. This is Master Keiko Tanaka. Master! They actually used the honorific without irony. I am Calvaris, yes. I have reviewed your submission. I gestured to the holoscreen floating between us, where their ridiculous claim glowed in official type. Perhaps you can explain what, exactly, you believe you have developed. Keiko stepped forward, and something about her movement made my defensive membranes ripple. She moved like a solar predator, all controlled energy and focused intent. We have perfected a technique that allows a blade to cut through air with such precision and force that it can sever solid objects beyond the blade's physical reach. Silence crashed through the chamber. Threxin broke it first, with a wet, gurgling sound that was definitely laughter. You expect us to believe that you can cut something by cutting nothing? I do not expect you to believe anything, Keiko replied, her voice calm but carrying an edge sharper than any blade I had ever registered. I expect you to test us. Is that not why we were called here? She had me there. Standard protocol demanded verification of any claimed technique before registration. I had overseen 7,412 such demonstrations. Most failed. Some succeeded. None had ever involved the preposterous notion of weaponizing empty space. Very well. I activated the testing arena's partition field. Standard evaluation. Protocol. You will demonstrate your technique against regulation-proof materials under monitored conditions. Threxin, prepare the observation matrices. The testing chamber materialized around us, a circular space 50 meters in diameter, with sensor arrays embedded in every surface. I had seen plasma weapons tested here, molecular disruptors, gravity hammers, and once, memorably, a device that could age targets forward in time by 30 seconds. The facility could measure force, trajectory, energy output, and 1,000 other variables down to the quantum level. Takeshi and Keiko moved to the center of the arena, with that same unsettling grace. No power armor. No visible weapons beyond the curved swords at their sides. The blades were primitive, barely registering on the energy scanners. Folded metal. Ancient technology that most species had abandoned before achieving spaceflight. What is your target preference? I asked. expecting them to request something simple. Perhaps a gel dummy or a soft polymer block? That, Keiko pointed to the far end of the arena, will do nicely. I followed her gesture to the structural support pillar. Reinforced titanium alloy, 2 meters in diameter, designed to hold up the entire testing facility. That is not a target. That is load-bearing architecture. Yes, Takeshi said simply. It is perfect. Absolutely not. Choose something from the standard target array, or this evaluation ends now. Keiko turned to face me fully, and I felt that predator focus lock onto my position. Evaluator Kelvaris, with respect, we did not travel 400 light-years to cut through foam blocks. Our technique is real. It is dangerous. And if you want to register it properly, you need to see what it can actually do. The pillar is essential infrastructure. We will cut halfway through, Takeshi offered, as if that somehow made the proposal reasonable. Enough to prove the technique works, not enough to compromise structural integrity. Your sensors will record everything. Is that not the point? I looked at Threxen, who had gone very still, all his eye stalks trained on the humans. This is highly irregular, I muttered. So is cutting air, he replied. He had a point. Fine. If they wanted to embarrass themselves by hacking uselessly at a pillar while claiming invisible air slashes did the work, so be it. Very well. Half depth only. If I detect any structural compromise, this evaluation terminates immediately. Understood. Keiko drew her blade in one smooth motion, the metal singing as it left the scabbard. The sound raised every sensory hair on my body. There was something primal about it, something that spoke to prey instincts I did not know I possessed. She walked to a position exactly 10 meters from the pillar. Not 9, not 11. Exactly 10, as if the distance mattered. Takeshi moved to her right, matching her stance, his own blade still sheathed. Observing ready stance, Threxen narrated into the record. Subjects are positioned 10.0 meters from target. No energy buildup detected. No gravitational anomalies. No exotic particles. Ambient air pressure normal. Temperature nominal. Keiko's eyes closed. The entire chamber seemed to hold its breath. Then she moved, and I understood why humans had crawled up from their gravity-cursed homeworld to walk among the stars. It was not fast, not in the way a plasma bolt is fast, or a railgun slug is fast. It was something else entirely. Her body flowed like liquid, the blade sweeping through the air in an arc so clean, so perfect, that my mathematical processors actually stuttered trying to track the geometry. There was no wasted motion, no excess energy, just pure, distilled intent made manifest through steel and flesh. The blade completed its arc. Nothing happened. Threxen's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. As expected, no measurable effect. The blade passed through empty air at a distance of 10 meters from the solid target. No contact, no transfer of kinetic energy, no. The pillar split. Not cracked, not dented, split. A perfectly horizontal line appeared across the titanium alloy, and the top half of the massive support column slid sideways by precisely 3 centimeters before the internal safety fields caught it. Every alarm in the facility screamed at once. Impossible, I whispered, my translator barely catching the word. Structural sensors confirm a clean cut. Threxen's voice had gone very small. Depth of incision, exactly 1.03 meters. Half the pillar's diameter. Force vectors, unknown. Energy signature, none detected. Method of material separation, undefined. Keiko sheathed her blade with the same ceremonial care she had drawn it. We call it ranged cutting. The principle is simple, though the execution takes most practitioners 20 years to master. The blade moves through air with such speed and precision that it creates a pressurized vacuum edge, a compressed wave of displaced atmosphere. That wave maintains coherence for 10 to 15 meters before dissipating. When it contacts solid matter, it delivers the cutting force of the blade without the blade ever making physical contact. That, I said slowly, violates at least 6 fundamental principles of physics. No, Takeshi spoke up. It uses 6 fundamental principles of physics in a way your species apparently never considered. Air is not nothing. Air is matter. And matter, when properly manipulated, becomes a weapon. I pulled up the sensor data, desperately searching for the trick, the hidden technology, the explanation that would make sense of what I had just witnessed. There was nothing. No energy field, no exotic particles, no gravitational manipulation, just a human, a primitive metal blade, and the impossible. Run it again, I demanded. Different target, different distance. I want full spectrum analysis on everything. They did not argue. For the next 3 hours, Keiko and Takeshi demonstrated their technique against 17 different materials at ranges varying from 5 to 14 meters. Every single cut was clean. Every single strike landed exactly where they intended. And every single time, our sensors detected nothing but air displacement and the human body's own bioelectric field. By the 43rd demonstration, I had stopped questioning and started accepting. Humans had somehow, impossibly, turned atmosphere into a blade. How? I finally asked, when they paused to rest. How did your species even discover this was possible? Takeshi smiled, and there was something almost sad in the expression. Because we had to. Our world gave us no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armored shells. So we made weapons, and then we spent thousands of years perfecting them. Every generation pushed a little further, understood a little deeper. We learned to cut water, then mist, then finally, air itself. And you want to register this as a combat technique? Threxin asked, his voice still stunned. We want to register it as a human cultural heritage technique, Keiko corrected, so that no one else can claim it, so that it remains ours. Cultural heritage. As if turning physics into weaponry was equivalent to a recipe or a song. There is a problem, I said carefully. Standard registration requires 3 things. Demonstration, which you have provided. Documentation, which I assume you can provide. And, Takeshi prompted, defense against, I finished. To register a technique officially, you must prove that adequate countermeasures exist. Otherwise, it is classified as a catastrophic weapon and banned under Galactic Statute 7-19. The 2 humans exchanged glances. That, Keiko said slowly, may be complicated. Explain. There are defenses, she admitted. But they are all human defenses, developed by humans, for use against humans. I am not certain they would work for other species. Show me anyway. What happened next, I would replay in my private records for years afterward, trying to understand it. Keiko and Takeshi faced each other across the arena, 10 meters apart. Without warning, Keiko launched her cut, the blade singing through air. I saw it this time, or thought I did, a shimmer like heat distortion racing toward Takeshi. He moved, not away, into it. His own blade flashed up and across in a motion so fast my optical processors registered it as a blur. And somewhere in that impossible instant, his steel met something in the empty air between them. There was a sound like 2 bells ringing at slightly different frequencies, and the shimmer, the cut, the weaponized air simply vanished. Deflection technique, Threxin breathed. They can block an attack that has no physical form. Not no physical form, Takeshi corrected, breathing slightly harder now. Just a form your instruments cannot easily measure. The compressed air has mass, has momentum. Meet it with an equal and opposite force at precisely the right angle, and you can redirect it. And if someone does not have your reflexes, I asked, your training, your... I gestured helplessly at their whole improbable existence. Then they would need different defenses, Keiko acknowledged. Energy shields might work, if calibrated for rapid atmospheric displacement. Certain types of armor could potentially disperse the force, or simply staying beyond 15 meters range. Might work? Could potentially? These are not adequate countermeasures for registration purposes. Then we will develop them, Takeshi said firmly. We did not come here to create a weapon of mass destruction, Evaluator. We came here to preserve our heritage and ensure fair recognition. Give us time to design proper countermeasures for non-human species, and we will provide them. I looked at the sensor data again, at the 17 perfectly clean cuts, at the readings that made no sense but were undeniably real. These humans had done something that should be impossible, and done it with nothing but meat, metal, and determination. How long? I asked. 6 months, Keiko said immediately. Give us 6 months, and we will return with full defensive protocols that any species can implement. This is all assuming, Threxen interjected, that your technique even works against non-human targets. Perhaps it is only effective on inanimate materials. The look Keiko gave him could have cut through another pillar. Would you like to volunteer for a demonstration? Absolutely not. Then perhaps we should move to the next standard evaluation, I suggested quickly, before my colleague volunteered himself into a medical emergency. Live target assessment, using regulation combat drones. I activated the drone bay, and 6 spherical combat units floated into the arena. They were standard Galactic Authority issue, equipped with medium shields and evasive programming, tough enough to test most weapon systems without sustaining permanent damage. Whenever you are ready, I told the humans. Keiko returned to her stance, blade held in what I now recognized as a very specific position. Angle, height, distance from her body, every variable precisely controlled. The drones began their evasion pattern, moving unpredictably through 3-dimensional space. She struck. The lead drone simply fell from the air, its propulsion system severed cleanly through the center. The second and third followed before the first had even hit the ground. The remaining 3 scattered, activating their shields and emergency protocols. It did not matter. Keiko's blade danced through empty air, and one by one, the drones died. Cut through shields, cut through armor, cut through the space they occupied, and simply ceased to function. In under 20 seconds, all 6 lay in pieces on the arena floor. Target assessment complete, I said into the record, my voice remarkably steady, considering my entire understanding of combat physics had just been disassembled and scattered across the testing chamber. 100% accuracy, 100% penetration, 0 defensive effectiveness from standard military countermeasures. Now, do you understand? Takeshi asked quietly. Why we need proper registration? Why we came here instead of simply keeping this technique hidden? Because if someone else discovers this principle, without the ethical framework my people have developed over centuries, without the restrictions and responsibilities we teach alongside the skill. He left the thought unfinished. I understood perfectly. An invisible attack that could penetrate shields, that required no energy signature, that could be launched from across a room. In the wrong hands, it would not be a cultural technique. It would be an assassination tool beyond compare. 6 months, I said finally. You have 6 months to develop and document adequate countermeasures. Return here with those protocols, and I will complete the registration. But understand this. I fixed both humans with my most serious gaze. If you fail, if you cannot provide adequate defensive measures, this technique will be classified as catastrophic and banned. Every human who knows it will be required to submit to memory suppression. Is that clear? Crystal, Keiko replied, and I chose not to correct her idiom. They left as they had arrived, moving with that predator grace, carrying swords that could cut what should not be cuttable. I watched them go, and then turned to Threxin. Did that really just happen? He asked. According to every sensor in this facility, yes. They cut air. They actually cut air and used it to cut other things. Yes. That is. He trailed off, searching for words. Terrifying? I suggested. Impossible? Magnificent? All of those. None of those. His eye stalks drooped in confusion. Calvaris, what kind of species spends 20 years learning to cut nothing? I pulled up the data file on humans, skimming through the basics. Gravity, heavy, homeworld. No natural weapons. Persistence, predators. Social, cooperative hunters. And then I saw it, buried in the anthropological notes. A quote from one of the early human diplomats, explaining their species' approach to problem-solving. If you can imagine it, we will attempt it. If you say it cannot be done, we will do it anyway. And if you tell us something is impossible, we will not rest until we have made it possible, just to prove you wrong. I closed the file and looked at the damaged pillar, at the scattered drones, at the sensor readings that documented the impossible. They are going to be trouble, Threxin observed. They already are, I replied. They already are. The 6 months passed like a slow orbit around a dying star, each day heavy with anticipation and dread. I had filed my preliminary report with the Galactic Combat Authority, carefully wording it to avoid causing widespread panic, while still conveying the fundamental absurdity of what I had witnessed. The response had been predictably chaotic. 3 admirals demanded immediate militarization studies. 5 ethics committees launched investigations into whether humans should be allowed to teach such techniques. And one particularly paranoid security chief from the Vorgath Confederacy suggested we simply quarantine Earth until the technique could be forgotten naturally. I had dismissed that last suggestion immediately. You cannot unring a bell, and you certainly cannot make an entire species forget something they had spent millennia perfecting. Now, standing in the same tribunal chamber where this whole affair had begun, I watched the doors with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Threxin fidgeted beside me, his mandibles clicking out a nervous rhythm. "Do you think they actually solved it?" he asked for the 17th time that morning. "We will know shortly," I replied, just as I had the previous 16 times. The doors opened. Takeshi and Keiko entered as before, but they were not alone. Behind them walked a being I recognized immediately, Professor Million Thrace, one of the most brilliant defensive technology specialists in the known galaxy. The Thurvian had 4 doctorates and a reputation for solving problems everyone else considered unsolvable. Behind Thrace came 2 more humans I did not recognize. One was older, his hair gone silver, wearing the same ceremonial attire as the swordmasters. The other was younger, female, carrying what appeared to be several storage containers and a portable holographic projector. "Evaluator Calvaris." Takeshi bowed slightly, a human gesture of respect. "May I introduce Grand Master Hiroshi Nakamura, the oldest living practitioner of our art, at 107 years, And this is Dr. Lisa Park, our foremost physicist specializing in atmospheric dynamics. 107. The human would be ancient by their species' standards, yet he moved with the same controlled grace as his younger counterparts. Perhaps even more so, as if time had refined rather than diminished his abilities. "And Professor Thrace?" I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. "We hired him," Keiko said simply. "6 months ago, you asked for adequate countermeasures. We decided the best way to develop them was to consult with someone who specialized in defeating the impossible." Thrace's vocal membranes vibrated with amusement. "When the humans first approached me, I thought it was an elaborate joke. Then they demonstrated their technique on my laboratory equipment. Very expensive equipment, I might add. After I finished being horrified, I became fascinated." "So you have solutions?" I asked, hope and skepticism warring in my chest. "We have 7 distinct defensive approaches." Dr. Park stepped forward, activating her projector. Holographic diagrams bloomed in the air between us. Each one tested extensively, each one adaptable to different species and technology levels. "May I present our findings?" I gestured for her to proceed, and she launched into an explanation that was simultaneously brilliant and deeply unsettling. "The fundamental principle," she began, "is that Master Keiko was correct in her initial assessment. The technique creates a compressed wave of atmospheric displacement. Think of it as a very narrow, very fast-moving pressure differential. Our sensors could not detect it because they were looking for energy signatures, but this is purely mechanical force propagating through a medium." Her holograms shifted, showing molecular structures and wave patterns. Defense option 1 is the simplest. Thick, flexible barriers. Materials like gel foam or layered fabric can absorb and disperse the pressure wave before it concentrates enough force to cut. We have tested this successfully with 17 different species-appropriate materials. The hologram changed again. Option 2. Active air current disruption. By generating turbulent airflow in a protective sphere around the target, you destabilize the pressure wave before it can form a coherent cutting edge. This requires power but is highly effective. Threxin leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued despite his earlier skepticism. "These both seem reasonable. What are the other 5? Dr. Park smiled, and I recognized the expression. It was the look of someone who had enjoyed solving a particularly difficult puzzle. Option 3 is for species with energy shielding capabilities. We have developed a shield modulation pattern that creates rapid atmospheric pressure fluctuations. Essentially, the shield vibrates at specific frequencies that disrupt the incoming wave. Option 4, she continued, is distance-based early warning systems. We can now detect the technique in action by monitoring for the specific pattern of air displacement. It gives you approximately 0.3 seconds of warning, which is enough time for most species to activate defenses or move. 0.3 seconds is not much time, I observed. It is enough, Grandmaster Nakamura spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of a century's experience. Because the technique also has limitations we have documented. Maximum effective range is 15 meters, as we stated. But accurate targeting becomes exponentially more difficult beyond 12 meters. And each strike requires specific stance, breathing, and recovery time. A skilled practitioner can deliver perhaps 6 strikes per minute against moving targets. 6 strikes per minute. 6 chances to kill from across a room with no visible weapon. Still terrifying, but at least now finite and counterable. Option 5, I prompted. Predictive movement algorithms. Professor Thrace took over the explanation. I have spent 6 months studying every recorded demonstration of this technique. the practitioners must telegraph their intent through body positioning. The stance is not optional. It is mechanically necessary to generate the required force. We have created a recognition system that can identify when the strike is coming based on the practitioner's physical position. That was genuinely impressive. And options 6 and 7? Option 6 is environmental. Dr. Park pulled up another diagram. The technique requires a relatively stable atmospheric medium. Introduce certain gases, alter the pressure significantly, or operate in a vacuum, and it becomes impossible to execute. Any spaceship or facility can implement atmospheric countermeasures. And finally, Keiko stepped forward. Option 7 is the one I personally insisted on. Training. We will offer defensive instruction to any species that wants it. Not how to perform the cut itself, but how to recognize it, evade it, and counter it using techniques adapted to each species' physical capabilities. Silence filled the chamber as I processed this information. They had actually done it. In 6 months, they had taken an impossible technique and created not 1 but 7 different ways to defend against it. More than that, they had brought in outside experts, documented everything, and offered to share their knowledge freely. "This is acceptable," I said slowly. "More than acceptable. This is exemplary work." "Then you will approve the registration?" Takeshi asked. "I will recommend approval pending final verification testing." "Professor Thrace, you are willing to testify that these countermeasures are genuinely effective?" "I am," the Thurvian confirmed. "I have personally tested each one under combat conditions. They work." "Very well. Let us begin final verification." What followed was the most comprehensive testing session I had ever supervised. We spent 8 hours in the arena, systematically verifying each defensive measure against increasingly difficult scenarios. Grandmaster Nakamura demonstrated the technique's limitations, showing exactly how stance, breathing, and recovery time constrained its use. Dr. Park walked us through the physics until even Threxen claimed to understand it, though I suspected he was exaggerating. Most impressively, they brought in volunteers. 3 humans who knew nothing about the technique were equipped with different defensive measures and placed in the arena. Keiko and Takeshi attempted to strike them using non-lethal training methods, targeting sensor-equipped dummies the volunteers carried. The gel foam barriers worked. The air current disruption worked. The early warning systems gave adequate response time. Every single countermeasure performed as advertised. By the time we finished, even my deepest skepticism had evaporated. "I have one final question," I said, as we compiled the last of the data. "Why? Why go through all this effort? You could have kept this technique secret, used it as a hidden advantage. Instead, you documented it, created defenses against it, and are now offering to teach those defenses to anyone who asks. Why?" Grandmaster Nakamura answered, his ancient eyes steady and clear. "Because that is what masters do, evaluator. We do not hoard knowledge. We do not seek advantage through secrecy. We preserve, we teach, and we ensure that what we have created serves life rather than destroys it. This technique was developed over thousands of years by people who understood that with great skill comes great responsibility. And if someone uses your own defenses against you," Threxen asked, "if they learn your weaknesses and exploit them?" "Then they will have earned their victory honestly," Keiko replied. "We are not seeking to be invincible. We are seeking to be fair." Fair. They had turned physics into a weapon, and their primary concern was fairness. "I will approve the registration," I announced formally. Technique designation: Human Atmospheric Pressure Cutting, culturally known as Ranged Air Severing. Classification: advanced combat technique with adequate countermeasures. Status: registered cultural heritage of Earth. All documentation, including defensive protocols, to be made available through the Galactic archives. Thank you, Evaluator. Takeshi bowed again. Do not thank me yet, I cautioned. This registration comes with conditions. First, any human teaching this technique must also teach the defensive measures. Second, you will submit to periodic reviews to ensure the countermeasures remain effective as the technique evolves. Third, if we discover any instance of this being used as an assassination tool or in violation of galactic law, the registration will be immediately revoked. Agreed? Agreed, all four humans said in unison. Then we are finished. Professor Thrace, your testimony will be entered into the official record. Dr. Park, your research will be published in the archives. Grandmaster, Masters, your technique is now officially recognized. They prepared to leave, gathering their equipment and documentation. But I found myself stopping them with one last question, the one that had haunted me throughout this entire process. Master Nakamura, I called out. 107 years you have practiced this art. In all that time, what is the most important thing you have learned? The old human was silent for a long moment, and I wondered if he would answer at all. Then he smiled, and it transformed his ancient face into something almost youthful. I learned that the cut is not the point, he said softly. Any fool can learn to swing a sword. What takes a lifetime to master is knowing when not to swing. The restraint is harder than the strike, Evaluator. Always remember that. They left then, the four humans and one Thurvian, carrying with them the knowledge of how to weaponize nothing, and, more importantly, how to defend against it. Threxen and I stood alone in the empty arena, surrounded by sensor data and damaged test equipment. He said you cannot cut air, my colleague murmured, reading from the original submission file. She swung once, and the Ayubito lights went out. Poetic, I admitted. Also technically accurate, given that she severed the power conduits during demonstration 41. Kelvaris, do you realize what this means? If humans can do this with air, what else might they be capable of? What other impossible things will they make possible? I looked at the data one last time, at the 7 defensive solutions, at the evidence of a species that would rather share its secrets than hoard them, that would rather be fair than invincible. I think, I said slowly, that we are very fortunate. They are on our side. Are they, though? On our side? They traveled 400 light-years to register a technique legally rather than use it illegally. They spent 6 months developing defenses to protect other species from their own innovation. They brought in outside experts and submitted to every test we demanded. I closed the file with a gesture of finality. Yes, Threxen. They are on our side, and I suspect that when the next great crisis comes, when some threat emerges that seems impossible to defeat, the humans will be the ones who figure out how to cut through it. By cutting air? By cutting whatever needs to be cut, I replied. That is what they do. They find the impossible and make it possible. They see what cannot be done and do it anyway. And then, most remarkably, they teach the rest of us how they did it. 3 months later, the Galactic Archives received its first request for defensive training in human atmospheric pressure cutting techniques. It came from a merchant fleet that had been harassed by pirates. 6 months after that, there were 300 requests. Within a year, the defensive protocols had been downloaded 17,000 times across 40 sectors. And in all that time, there was not a single reported incident of the technique being used illegally. I watched the statistics with satisfaction. vindicated in my decision to approve the registration. The humans had been true to their word, teaching defense alongside offense, restraint alongside power. Then one day, a new application crossed my desk. It was from Earth again, from a different group of humans. The subject line read, "Registration Request, Quantum State Manipulation Through Focused Intent." I stared at it for a long time. "Threxin," I called to my colleague. "I think we may need to expand the testing arena." "Why?" He appeared in my doorway, mandibles already clicking with anxiety. "Because apparently, cutting air was just the beginning." He read the new application over my shoulder, and his eye stalks went completely rigid. "They want to register what?" he whispered. "Exactly," I replied, already pulling up the scheduling system. "Exactly." Somewhere, somehow, humans had found another impossible thing to make possible. And true to form, they were here to register it properly, document it thoroughly, and presumably develop adequate defenses against it. I approved the appointment request and leaned back in my chair, a smile crossing my face despite myself. Terrifying, impossible, magnificent. That was humanity in 3 words, and the galaxy was just beginning to understand what that meant.